Hello, everyone. In the first lecture, I provided you with an introduction to the field of discourse analysis. We talked about the history of discourse analysis. We talked about the scope of discourse analysis. And we talked about the kind of approach that we take in analyzing written and spoken discourse. So in this lecture, to begin with, I'm going to talk about one of the main constructs that we often talk about in the field of discourse analysis. So this is something that we have to be familiar with in analyzing discourse. And that construct is discourse community. What is a discourse community? I'm sure you must have heard, you must have certainly heard this term, discourse community. Here is a definition of a discourse community. A discourse community is a group of people who share some kind of activity. Members of a discourse community have particular ways of communicating with each other. They generally have shared goals and may have shared values and beliefs. A person is often a member of more than one discourse community. A discourse community is a group of people. A community is certainly a collection of people. So it has to be a group of people. But any group of people would not make a discourse community because they have to share some kind of activity. So what is the kind of activity that they should share? So it can be anything. It can be a group of people taking the same class or following the same course. It can be a group of people following a sport, or it can be a group of people who are fans of a particular movie or a drama or a television program. Or it can be a group of, let's say, nature lovers. They have created a group and they're interested in nature and they do activities together and they communicate about it. A discourse community is a group of people who share some kind of activity. So they have to share some activity to begin with. And second, members of a discourse community have particular ways of communicating with each other. Maybe by having meetings, maybe by creating a Facebook page or a group, or maybe through a WhatsApp group, or maybe through telecommunication, or maybe through emails, telephone calls, maybe a Google group. So there are various ways in which people can communicate with each other. The third point is they generally have shared goals and may have shared values and beliefs. A group of people to be considered a discourse community, they should have a shared goal or goals. Let's take a group of people who are interested in a particular sport. There are many groups that have been formed for sports. For example, cricket. And what is the shared goal they have? The shared goal that they have is knowing more about that particular sport or getting updates about that particular sport. or expressing their views and opinions about that sport. So that could be the shared goal. Enjoying the sport together, getting to know more information about the sport or updates, having updates about that particular sport. And then a person is often a member of more than one discourse community. So we can be a member of many discourse communities at the same time. If you are learning a skill, let's say cooking, and you may be a member of a discourse community that talks about things related to cooking. If you are a member of a discourse community that has been formed for education purpose, for example, if you're following a particular course of a study, and then you must have formed a discourse community, and you can be a member of that community as well. And if you're working anywhere, and you can be a member of that discourse community as well. So a person can simultaneously become a member of many discourse communities. John Swales, in his famous article, The Concept of Discourse Community, has listed 6 characteristics associated with the discourse community. Now, let's first look at these characteristics, and we'll try to understand what each characteristic means. The first characteristic is a discourse community has a broadly agreed set of common public goals. If we are a member of a discourse community, the first thing that we understand or should understand is the agreed set of common goals of that discourse community. Am I a member of this community because I am interested in nature? I'm interested in a particular sport. I'm a fan of a particular drama or a movie or a television program. So what is the agreed set of common public goals of that community? If there is no agreed set of common goals, public goals, it's very unlikely that a discourse community may get formed. If we don't have a shared goals, if we don't have shared goals, if we don't have a shared goal, it's very unlikely that we would form a discourse community. The reason why we form a discourse community is because we have a shared goal. Even though we do not talk about the shared goal or the public goal, common goal, in open. When we become a member of a discourse community, we understand what the goal of that community is, or what the goals of that community are. Otherwise, it's very difficult to become a member of that community. Let's consider teachers as members of a discourse community. Teachers working at a particular institute, teachers working in a particular education zone, or it can even be teachers of English, or teachers of mathematics, or teachers of science. Maybe they have created a discourse community. What shared goals do they have? Maybe they have one goal that they can have is communicating about teaching that subject or language and sharing information about teaching, maybe about teaching materials, maybe about teaching methods, maybe discussing various issues and problems that they have. And that is what teachers would do as a discourse community. University students can become a discourse community, or students following a certain degree program can make a discourse community. And if you have created WhatsApp groups for this particular course or for the courses that you are taking of this degree program, and you are a discourse community, you are a part of a discourse community. And think about the things that you communicate in that community. Maybe as a WhatsApp group or as a Facebook group, you communicate things about, you communicate about maybe assignments, about lectures, about lecturers, about readings, or about various issues that you have while following the course. So your goal would be to successfully follow the course. And in order to do so, you need some communication. You need to interact with the other members of that community. And that could be the goal. So a discourse community, to begin with, the first characteristic according to Swales of a discourse community is it has an agreed upon goals, common goals, one or many. Second, a discourse community has mechanisms of intercommunication among their members. So what does this mean? What do we mean by mechanisms of intercommunication? So if we have a group of people, we certainly try to communicate, exchange ideas, exchange views. So how do we communicate among our members? How do we exchange ideas? And that is what we mean by mechanisms of intercommunication. Mechanisms can mean meetings, telecommunications, maybe telephone calls, correspondence, maybe letters, notices, newsletters, conversations. And in addition to that, we have Facebook groups, we have WhatsApp groups, Instagram. So there are various ways in which we communicate. So mechanisms or discourse community has mechanisms of intercommunication. So that's the second characteristic of a discourse community. Participatory mechanisms vary according to the communities involved. So if all members have access to, let's say, a smartphone, so we would create a WhatsApp group or a Facebook group. But suppose it is a group of people who are old and who don't use this kind of technology, and their mechanism of intercommunication can be through monthly meetings or newsletters or through other methods of correspondence, or maybe through letters. And there are certain religious groups And they sometimes have weekly meetings or monthly meetings. After a particular religious activity, they may have a short meeting and they communicate about what they should do together and what they would like to do together. And this is their mechanism of intercommunication. So participatory mechanisms can vary according to the communities involved. So that's obvious. Third characteristic, according to Swelsey, is a discourse community uses its participatory mechanisms primarily to provide information and feedback. So using those mechanisms, so this is related to the point that we talked about under B, having mechanisms for intercommunication. Using those intercommunications, or mechanisms of intercommunication, they share, exchange ideas, they share, they challenge, they plan. So if it is a sports group, a group of people or a community exchanging ideas about a particular sport event, and they share ideas. And they exchange views. Sometimes they challenge views. Sometimes they plan. If they're planning to do something together, so they make use of participatory mechanisms and they get involved in various speech acts, sharing, challenging, planning. Those are speech acts. And then the next point is, or the characteristic is, a discourse community utilizes and possesses one or more genres in the communicative furtherance of its aims. In order to achieve their goals, they have more than one genre. They make use of more than one genre. What is a genre? Genre is how things get done when language is used to accomplish them. So using sending a newsletter or making a telephone call or sending a text message. These are sending an email. These are different genres that we use to communicate. Or having a public meeting. So these are different examples of genres: parliamentary speech, letters, lectures, advertisements. So in the case of communication, intercommunication, emails can be a genre. Telephone calls, meetings, newsletters can be genres. So a discourse community would certainly utilize more than one genre to communicate. In addition to owning genres, a discourse community has acquired some specific lexes. They have their own jargon, slang, buzzwords that they use. And this is quite common in discourse communities. Jargon specific and unique to a community. For example, if you take teachers teachers of English as a discourse community, suppose they have a WhatsApp group or they have a Facebook group. And when they communicate, they may use some jargon, slang, buzzwords like ESL, EFL, L1, L2, target language. And those are some specific terms, words unique to that community. if medical practitioners form a discourse community, they may have their own jargon. And university students, when they form communities, they have their own slang, jargon as well. So this lexical aspect is specific lexis is another characteristic of a discourse community. A discourse community has a threshold level of members with a suitable degree of relevant content and discoursal expertise. So members vary depending on the kind of expertise that they have. Discourse community have changing memberships. Individuals enter as apprentices and leave by death or in other less involuntary ways. However, survival of the community depends on a reasonable ratio between novices and experts. Someone can be a member of a discourse community, but that person may leave that community for various reasons. Obviously by death, but there can be other less involuntary ways as well. Well, if suppose someone is following a course and that person becomes a member of a discourse community, and if that person stops following that course, the person may also leave that discourse community. Leaving a discourse community can happen due to various reasons: lack of interest, maybe the person is moving out of a particular area, maybe that the person is not interested in a particular sport or a drama or a television program anymore. Due to various reasons, people can leave discourse communities. Now, here we have talked about 6 characteristics associated with the discourse community. So now, as an activity, I would like you to think of at least 2 discourse communities that you are a member of. Analyze them using the 6 criteria Jones Wells has proposed. So think about the goal, the shared goal of the discourse community that you are a part of. Think about the mechanisms of intercommunication. Think about the membership. Think about different genres that you use. And think about the lexis. So using these 6 characteristics, so try to analyze the discourse community that you are a part of. So this is a way, this is going to make you more familiar with these 6 characteristics of a discourse community or discourse communities that Jones Wells has talked about. Right, after talking about the concept of discourse community, now I'm going to talk about genre analysis. So this is the new topic that we are going to talk about, genre analysis. What is a genre? When people communicate, they take part in a particular communicative event or genre. Whenever we communicate, we take part in a particular communicative event or genre. Now, the communicative event that you take part in can be a conversation. That conversation can also be a telephone conversation. So that is a genre. Face-to-face conversation it is a genre. And if you're writing a notice, that is a genre. Text message is a genre. A speech is a genre. A lecture is a genre. So any communicative event can be considered a genre. So what are some examples of genres? Let's consider written discourse to begin with. Well, we have emails, we have text messages, we have academic articles, we have news items. So those are different examples of written discourse. And if you take a spoken discourse, then we have another set of genres. Speech is a genre. As I said earlier, telephone conversation is a genre. And then even when we say speeches, we have different kinds of speeches. We have funeral speeches, wedding speeches. So all those are different genres. And academic lectures, interviews, or television interviews. So these are genres, different genres. And how do we identify a genre? How do we determine whether something should be considered a genre or not? And this is where we need to be familiar with the characteristics of a genre. There are three characteristics associated with the genre. One characteristic is where the setting in which the genre occurs. A genre occurs in a particular setting. Second characteristic is a genre is organized in a particular way. And the third characteristic is genre has a distinctive communicative function. Now think about a text message. What is the setting for a text message? When would you use that genre for communication? Well, if you have to send a short message to someone, it can be either official or personal. You may use a text message. But that is the setting in which a text message is allowed. Suppose you have got a new job and now you have to assume duties. And you would not send a text message to your boss or the management saying that you're going to assume duties with effect from this particular day. Because a text message is not allowed or text message is not accepted in that particular setting. You would rather write a letter. But if you are unable to report to work on a particular day, you may write a text message. a text message is appropriate in that particular setting. So each genre occurs in a particular setting. There's a setting that it is associated with. And second characteristic, if you take the second characteristic into consideration, it is organized in a particular way. Now think about a text message. How would you organize it? Would you write complete sentences in a text message? Not really. Nobody would use complete sentences in a text message. There can be certain parts missing in a text message. Because we're trying to use a limited number of words, letters in a text message. But in a letter, when we write a formal letter, we would not do that. A text message is supposed to be short. So we have the liberty or we have the freedom to delete or avoid certain parts when we write a text message. But we don't have that liberty or we don't have that freedom when we write a letter, especially an official letter. We have to write it in complete sentences. And then a genre has a distinctive communicative function. Each genre has its distinctive communicative function. Text message has its own function, which is distinct from an official letter. So these are thus the three characteristics of a genre. So now, as a practice activity, consider the following genres and see whether you can describe them using these three characteristics. The first genre is a weather report. The second genre is official letters. So I want you to think about the particular setting in which this genre occurs and how it is organized. And third, its distinctive communicative function. Right. So what is the setting for a weather report? Where does a weather report occur? You must have certainly thought about news bulletins. A weather report generally comes in a news report, is a part of a news report. But where does it exactly occur? Where do we find the weather report? Think about it. Is it at the beginning of the news bulletin or at the end of the news bulletin? It's at the end of the news bulletin, isn't it so? A weather report generally comes at the end of the news report. And if you think about, so that's the particular setting for a weather report. But there are certain, so that is in general, a weather report, the weather report is the last thing in a news bulletin. And then the second characteristic is organized in a particular way. So there are several features associated with a weather report. One thing is a weather report is short. And if you carefully analyze a weather report, you can see particular structures. Heavy rain expected. A thunderstorm is expected. So if you carefully look at the kind of language they use, so they use passive voice. And they use words like expected as it is a prediction. And if they talk about what happened yesterday, and they would say reported. So the way a weather report is organized in terms of linguistic features and in terms of how it is organized, in general, you can see several characteristics. And certainly it has a distinctive communicative function. So the function would be the goal would be to communicate about weather. In particular, could be to report on what happened in the past or yesterday, and to make a prediction on what is likely to happen tomorrow. And then if you take the second genre, which is official letters, once again, it occurs in a particular setting. We would write an official letter in an official setting. If you assume duties, you are likely to write an official letter. If you want to make a complaint, you would write an official letter. If you want to make a request, an official request, you would write an official letter. And then it is organized in a particular way. So if you actually look at an official letter, you can see that there's a way in which an official letter is organized. Where do you write the sender's address? There is a place for the sender's address. Think about where would you write, where you would write the date and how you would write the date. And then think about the receiver's address. Think about the salutation and the heading and how you would begin your letter and how you would internally organize the content of the letter. And then how you would end the letter. So all these are characteristics of the way in which you organize the letter. And these are characteristics of that particular genre. And then it has a distinctive communicative function. So what is the communicative function of an official letter? It can convey several things. It can convey many things depending on the situation. Maybe to assume duties, to maybe to resign from a post, to make an official complaint. So this is how we can analyze different genres using these three characteristics. A genre occurs in a particular setting. There is a setting a genre is generally associated with. It is organized in a particular way. linguistically, as well as other features. For example, a letter, how it is the kind of language in terms of the kind of language that we use, as well as the way in which we organize the letter, and then has a distinctive communicative function. So what is a genre then? So looking at or considering what we have already talked about, what can we call a genre? Genres are ways in which people get things done through their use of spoken and written discourse. So this is a simple definition of a genre. So genre is a way in which we get things done using spoken or written discourse. How do we send a text message? How do we write a letter? How do we deliver a speech? So genre is born in the way we get something done, or depending on the way something gets done. Genre can be considered a staged, goal-oriented, purposeful activity in which speakers engage as members of our culture. It is a stage, it involves several stages. The production of a genre involves several stages. It's goal-oriented, it has its own goal. Purposeful activity, so there is a purpose that we are trying to achieve in which speakers engage as members of our culture. There's a cultural aspect to genre as well. How a letter is written is different from culture to culture. Now, the immediate example that I can think of is how we write letters in our culture. Now, think about the way people write letters in Sinhala, even if they write an official letter. So they would generally, when people write in Sinhala, they would begin with their name and then the address. That's in Sinhala. The sender's name and sender's address. But if it is an official letter written in English, it's very unlikely that they would write the sender's name and they would only write the sender's address. So that's something cultural. In the English culture, they would not write. So when they write an official letter, they would not write the sender's name at the top left-hand corner or the right-hand corner. So wherever you write it. So the sender's address is written, but the sender's name is not written at the top. But in Sinhala, people write the sender's name. So that's something cultural. If we talk about speeches, we can see this cultural aspect as well. So a genre then is a staged, goal-oriented, purposeful activity. In addition, a genre is social because we participate in genres with other people. It is goal-oriented because we use genres to get things done. Staged because it usually takes us a few steps to reach our goals. So this is an elaboration of Martin's definition of a genre. Genre thus is a kind of social agreement about ways of doing things with language in particular social and cultural settings. This is another useful definition of genre. The genre is a social agreement. Why do we write a text message in a limited number of words? When we write a text message, we would generally write it very short. We'll try to make it very brief, as short as possible. Why? Because there's a general agreement, social agreement of what an acceptable text message is. When we write an official letter, why do we write the sender's address at a particular place, receiver's address at a particular place, and the date in a particular place? Because it's a social agreement. Salutation. Dear sir, dear madam, or dear Mr. Silva. And depending on the kind of salutation, and we are going to change the way in which we end the letter as well. Yours sincerely, yours faithfully. So if you start the letter as dear sir, dear madam, we would say yours faithfully. If we begin the letter as dear Mr. Silva, so we would say yours sincerely. Why? There is no rule for that. It is just due to a social agreement. There's an agreement among people or a discourse community about the way in which a letter should be written. The same thing works with speeches, emails, letters, academic lectures, or any genre that we are concerned with. Genres thus are culture specific and have particular purposes, stages, and linguistic features associated with them, the meanings of which need to be interpreted in relation to the cultural and social context in which they occur. Genres are culture specific. What is acceptable in a particular culture may not be acceptable in another culture. If you take a speech as an example, what is acceptable in a particular culture may not be acceptable in another culture. And linguistic features, there are also linguistic features associated with a particular genre which can differ from culture to culture, meanings of which need to be interpreted in relation to the cultural and social context in which they occur. So there's this cultural aspect that we cannot ignore in genre analysis. Approaching genre analysis. So when we analyze a genre, these are some of the things that we look at. When we analyze a genre, these are some of the things that we look at. One thing that we look at is the setting of the genre. Setting is when and where something occurs. Where does something occur, or when does something occur? So setting often has two aspects, when and where. Now, if you take the weather report, where does it occur? When does it occur? The setting of the genre. And then the focus and the perspective of the genre. So what is the focus? Now, the second point, the focus and perspective of the genre and the purpose or the purposes of the genre. So there's a slight overlapping. So they talk about the same thing. So combining point 2 and 3, we can say the purpose of the genre, the goal of the genre. What is the purpose? What is the goal? So we have to look at that. What are we trying to achieve by producing this particular genre? Is it to convey information about a particular thing? Is the goal to generate humor? Is the goal to inform some people? So the purpose of the goal, the purpose of the genre, the goal of the genre, and that is that second and third point. So we have to talk about those. Third, the intended audience of the genre. What is the intended audience? Whenever we produce a genre, there is an intended audience. We have an intended audience in our head. If we write a letter, if we write a message, if we deliver a speech, we have an intended audience in our head. The speech may vary depending on the intended audience. Think about a medical practitioner talking about corona. And if the audience is a set of medical practitioners, how would that person organize the speech? The person may use jargon, highly specific words used in that field, because his intended audience is medical practitioners. But if the intended audience is a general public, then of course that medical practitioner would make certain changes, would not use highly specific jargon that the general public is not familiar with, would take time to explain or elaborate on certain terms, points. So the intended audience is a key aspect in any genre. And then the relationship between participants in the genre. So what is the kind of relationship that we have? Person who is sending a message and the person who is receiving the message. Think about sending a text message to your classmates, one of your classmates, and sending a text message to your teacher or lecturer. And would you organize it in the same way? Certainly not, right? So when you write a text message to your classmate, so how would you use, what kind of salutation would you use? How would you organize? What kind of language would you use? But when you write a text message, maybe you're trying to convey the same message. But what kind of language would you use? So the relationship between the participants of a particular genre plays a main role in the way that genre is organized. And then expectations, conventions, and requirements for the genre. There are some conventions associated with the particular genre. Text message has to be short. That is an expectation as well. So if I receive a text message and if it is so long, And that is a violation of the expectation of that the particular convention or a requirement of that particular genre. We would expect a text message to be short. We would expect an email to be formal. If the email is actually written for official purpose. So there are requirements of a particular genre, conventions, expectations. So when we analyze a genre, we can look at those. The background knowledge, the values, understandings, it is assumed genre participants will share with each other, including what is important to them and what is not. So the background knowledge, values, understandings associated with a particular genre, or participants, genre participants share with each other. So that is also something that we can look at. And the relationship the genre has with other texts and genres, how this genre is different from other genres, or what kind of similarities this genre has with other genres. For example, a text message, how is it similar to a letter and how is it different from a letter? Like that, we can also talk about the characteristics this particular genre shares with other genres, or this particular genre does not share with other genres. So this is a set of things or a list of things that we would look at or we should look at when we analyze a genre. So using these characteristics or using these points or aspects, now we are going to analyze genres. So the first thing that we are going to look at or talk about or analyze is a political speech. Now I'm going to show you a political speech. And then after watching this, we are going to analyze this political speech. So when you watch this, the first goal of this, the first thing that you should do when you watch this video is to understand the speech and then think about, as a second step, different aspects of this genre. See whether you can identify the setting of this genre. See whether you can identify the purpose of the genre, goal, and what is the intended audience. What kind of relationship do you see between participants in this genre? And then conventions, expectations, and requirements for the genre, values, the background knowledge, understandings that the participants share, and how this genre is different from or similar to other genres. So we can look at, so ask yourself these questions. So what is the setting to this genre? Who are the participants? What is the intended audience? What is the relationship like between the participants of the genre? That is the speaker and the people who are attending or listening. So this is what we are going to do. And this is, of course, analyzing that genre. So while listening to, so you can listen to this several times. First, I would advise you to listen to it and try to understand what he says. And second, when you listen to this, think about these different aspects, and then we can start analyzing the genre. Okay, let's now move to the speech that I'm going to show you. And this is a speech delivered by Barack Obama. Okay, let me first show you the speech. Now we are going to listen to this speech delivered by Barack Obama. And let me tell you something about this speech. And this is the speech that he delivered when he first won the presidential election in 2008. In the United States, generally, the presidential election is held in November. That's every 4 years. Even though the presidential election is held in November and a new president is appointed, he is not going to assume duties as the president until it is January. So generally the president would assume duties in January. Until he assumes duties, the president in office would continue as the president. So the new president is not going to straight away assume duties, because there is already a president who is going to rule the country or govern the country until January. So during this period, the newly appointed president is called the president-elect. So Barack Obama has been chosen as the president. He has won the election, and now he's the president-elect, but he's still not the president of the United States. So this is the moment when he's addressing the nation, which is not as the president, but as the person who has won the election in 2008. So as the president-elect. So after winning the election, he's having a rally in Chicago, as you can see on the screen, and he's delivering a speech. So we are going to watch this speech and we are going to analyze this one. So let's first listen to what he says.
The next first family of the United States of America.
Hello, Chicago. If there is anyone out there who still doubts that America is a place where all things are possible, who still wonders if the dream of our founders is alive in our time, who still questions the power of our democracy, tonight is your answer. It's the answer told by lines that stretched around schools and churches in numbers this nation has never seen, by people who waited 3 hours and 4 hours, many for the first time in their lives, because they believed that this time must be different, that their voices could be that difference. It's the answer spoken by young and old, rich and poor, Democrat and Republican, black, white, Hispanic, Asian, Native American, gay, straight, disabled and not disabled, Americans who sent a message to the world that we have never been just a collection of individuals or a collection of red states and blue states. We are and always will be the United States of America. It's the answer that led those who've been told for so long by so many to be cynical and fearful and doubtful about what we can achieve, to put their hands on the arc of history and bend it once more toward the hope of a better day. It's been a long time coming, but tonight, because of what we did on this day, in this election, at this defining moment, change has come to America. A little bit earlier this evening, I received an extraordinarily gracious call from Senator McCain. Senator McCain fought long and hard in this campaign, and he's fought even longer and harder for the country that he loves. He has endured sacrifices for America that most of us cannot begin to imagine. We are better off for the service rendered by this brave and selfless leader. I congratulate him. I congratulate Governor Palin for all that they've achieved, and I look forward to working with them to renew this nation's promise in the months ahead. I want to thank my partner in this journey, a man who campaigned from his heart and spoke for the men and women he grew up with on the streets of Scranton and rode with on the train home to Delaware, the Vice President-elect of the United States, Joe Biden. And I would not be standing here tonight without the unyielding support of my best friend for the last 16 years, the rock of our family, the love of my life, the nation's next First Lady, Michelle Obama. Sasha and Malia, I love you both more than you can imagine, and you have earned the new puppy that's coming with us to the White House. And while she's no longer with us, I know my grandmother's watching, along with the family that made me who I am. I miss them tonight. I know that my debt to them is beyond measure. To my sister Maya, my sister Alma, all my other brothers and sisters, thank you so much for all the support that you've given me. I am grateful to them. To my campaign manager, David Plouffe. The unsung hero of this campaign, who built the best political campaign, I think, in the history of the United States of America. To my chief strategist, David Axelrod, who's been a partner with me every step of the way. To the best campaign team ever assembled in the history of politics, you made this happen, and I am forever grateful for what you've sacrificed to get it done. But above all, I will never forget who this victory truly belongs to. It belongs to you. It belongs to you. I was never the likeliest candidate for this office. We didn't start with much money or many endorsements. Our campaign was not hatched in the halls of Washington. It began in the backyards of Des Moines, in the living rooms of Concord, and the front porches of Charleston. It was built by working men and women who dug into what little savings they had to give $5 and $10 and $20 to the cause. It grew strength from the young people who rejected the myth of their generation's apathy, who left their homes and their families for jobs that offered little pay and less sleep. It drew strength from the not-so-young people who braved the bitter cold and scorching heat to knock on doors of perfect strangers, and from the millions of Americans who volunteered and organized and proved that more than 2 centuries later, a government of the people, by the people, and for the people has not perished from the earth. This is your victory. Now, I know you didn't do this just to win an election, and I know you didn't do it for me. You did it because you understand the enormity of the task that lies ahead. For even as we celebrate tonight, we know the challenges that tomorrow will bring are the greatest of our lifetime. 2 wars, a planet in peril, the worst financial crisis in a century. Even as we stand here tonight, we know there are brave Americans waking up in the deserts of Iraq and the mountains of Afghanistan to risk their lives for us. There are mothers and fathers who will lie awake after their children fall asleep and wonder how they'll make the mortgage, or pay their doctor's bills, or save enough for their child's college education. There's new energy to harness, new jobs to be created, new schools to build, and threats to meet, alliances to repair. The road ahead will be long. Our climb will be steep. We may not get there in 1 year or even in 1 term, but America, I have never been more hopeful than I am tonight that we will get there. I promise you, we as a people will get there. There will be setbacks and false starts. There are many who won't agree with every decision or policy I make as president. And we know the government can't solve every problem. But I will always be honest with you about the challenges we face. I will listen to you, especially when we disagree. And above all, I will ask you to join in the work of remaking this nation the only way it's been done in America for 221 years. Block by block, brick by brick, calloused hand by calloused hand. What began 21 months ago in the depths of winter cannot end on this autumn night. This victory alone is not the change we seek. It is only the chance for us to make that change. And that cannot happen if we go back to the way things were. It can't happen without you, without a new spirit of service, a new spirit of sacrifice. So let us summon a new spirit of patriotism, of responsibility, where each of us resolves to pitch in and work harder and look after not only ourselves but each other. Let us remember that if this financial crisis taught us anything, it's that we cannot have a thriving Wall Street while Main Street suffers. In this country, we rise or fall as one nation, as one people. Let's resist the temptation to fall back on the same partisanship and pettiness and immaturity that has poisoned our politics for so long. Let's remember that it was a man from this state who first carried the banner of the Republican Party to the White House, a party founded on the values of self-reliance and individual liberty and national unity. Those are values that we all share. And while the Democratic Party has won a great victory tonight, we do so with a measure of humility and determination to heal the divides that have held back our progress. As Lincoln said to a nation far more divided than ours, we are not enemies, but friends. Though passion may have strained, it must not break our bonds of affection. And to those Americans whose support I have yet to earn, I may not have won your vote tonight, but I hear your voices. I need your help, and I will be your president too. And all those watching tonight from beyond our shores, from parliaments and palaces, to those who are huddled around radios in the forgotten corners of the world, our stories are singular, but our destiny is shared. And a new dawn of American leadership is at hand. To those who would tear the world down, we will defeat you. To those who seek peace and security, we support you. And to all those who have wondered if America's beacon still burns as bright, tonight we proved once more that the true strength of our nation comes not from the might of our arms or the scale of our wealth, but from the enduring power of our ideals: democracy, liberty, opportunity, and unyielding hope. That's the true genius of America, that America can change. Our union can be perfected. And what we've already achieved gives us hope for what we can and must achieve tomorrow. This election had many firsts and many stories that will be told for generations, but one that's on my mind tonight is about a woman who cast her ballot in Atlanta. She is a lot like the millions of others who stood in line to make their voice heard in this election, except for one thing. Ann Nixon Cooper is 106 years old. She was born just a generation past slavery, a time when there were no cars on the road or planes in the sky, when someone like her couldn't vote for two reasons: because she was a woman and because of the color of her skin. And tonight, I think about all that she's seen throughout her century in America: the heartache and the hope, the struggle and the progress, the times we were told that we can't, and the people who pressed on with that American creed: yes, we can. At a time when women's voices were silenced and their hopes dismissed, she lived to see them stand up and speak out and reach for the ballot: yes, we can. When there was despair in the Dust Bowl and depression across the land, she saw a nation conquer fear itself with a new deal, new jobs, a new sense of common purpose: yes, we can. When the bombs fell on our harbor and tyranny threatened the world, she was there to witness a generation rise to greatness and a democracy was saved: yes, we can. She was there for the buses in Montgomery, the hoses in Birmingham, a bridge in Selma, and a preacher from Atlanta who told the people that we shall overcome: yes, we can. A man touched down on the moon. A wall came down in Berlin. A world was connected by our own science and imagination. And this year, in this election, she touched her finger to a screen and cast her vote. Because after 106 years in America, through the best of times and the darkest of hours, she knows how America can change. Yes, we can. America, we have come so far. We have seen so much, but there's so much more to do. So tonight, let us ask ourselves, if our children should live to see the next century, if my daughters should be so lucky to live as long as Ann Nixon Cooper, what change will they see? What progress will we have made? This is our chance to answer that call. This is our moment. This is our time to put our people back to work and open doors of opportunity for our kids, to restore prosperity and promote the cause of peace, to reclaim the American dream and reaffirm that fundamental truth that out of many we are one, that while we breathe, we hope, and where we are met with cynicism and doubt and those who tell us that we can't, we will respond with that timeless creed that sums up the spirit of a people. Yes, we can. Thank you. God bless you, and may God bless the United States of America.
What must it feel like? Any of it. Start anywhere on the list. After this campaign, to address that kind of a crowd, to have this agenda awaiting, the prospect of bringing up two beautiful little girls in the White House, prospect of the House training a puppy in the White House. It's been a long time. It's all happening tonight for Barack Obama.
Right, so that's the speech that we are going to analyze. So now I would like you to listen to that speech again and then think about those aspects that we talked about, the setting, the participants, the purpose, the relationship between participants of the genre, and then conventions, requirements, expectations of the genre. So try to analyze this genre in terms of those features, the list of features that we have already looked at. And that's the homework for you. And when we meet next time, we would have a common discussion, and then we will try to put together an analysis of Obama's speech. Thank you. I'll see you next time then.